Just that what I have come to realize and learn over the years is that words are so powerful, and the
Mm,
way that the way that we speak outwardly and the way that we speak internally, our cells are listening. And so if we are constantly attaching ourselves to the thing, my pain, my autoimmune is going to have an impact on us, whether we think it or not. We can actually, in our ego self or whatever kind of, like sort of our, like our head, we can be like, that's not affecting me. I know the difference. No, it actually is affecting you.
Welcome to Hopeful and Wholesome, the show where ambitious women come home to their bodies. I'm your host, Hope Pedraza, and I'm a functional practitioner, human design guide, and expert on all things energy, and your partner in decoding the language of your body. This is your space to reconnect with your body's wisdom, reclaim your energy, and rise into alignment in your health, your business, and your life. Because thriving isn't about pushing harder, it's about learning to listen deeper. So let's dive in because your next breakthrough starts right now. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show my friend Vanessa Lopez, and Vanessa brings over 2 decades of experience across the health, wellness, and fitness fields, but it's her own personal health journey that's helped shape her the most. With a background in education, skincare, and holistic living, she's spent years navigating complex health challenges from the inside out. Her podcast, Intentionally Well, is a space for thoughtful conversations around healing, hope, and breaking free from the systems that keep us stuck. Through it all, Vanessa leads with honesty, warmth, and an unwavering belief in the deeper restoration, body, mind, and spirit. We are diving into all of that today with Vanessa, including her own personal journey and how she has navigated it all. And I loved this conversation, bringing this conversation forward, because a lot of times the stories we share are the stories at the end, right? It's the transformation, it's the full restoration. And I love this conversation because Vanessa is still navigating the messy middle of everything that she's been experiencing with her health. And so we're talking about that, like what it looks like to be this voice in the health and wellness space while also still navigating her own challenges and navigating all the things that come with that, including the grief of the things that may never happen because of her health challenges, the changes within herself and the growth and all the pieces, the challenges and the vulnerabilities of this process. This is such a beautiful conversation with Vanessa. So let's jump in. All right, y'all. I'm here with Vanessa. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vanessa.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And I'm excited for our collaboration here. And Vanessa has her own amazing podcast. And so we're doing a little dabble there. And then she's coming on mine. And I wanted her to come on just to share a little bit about her journey. And Vanessa, I would love to start there. I think your story, as we talked about before we recorded, I think your story and kind of where you are in your journey and where you are in your journey is so unique because we're so used to hearing the triumph stories and at the end, like, oh, this is what I went through and it's all great now. And look at how healthy I am. And I got, I healed all these things. And it's not often that someone who is especially someone who's in the industry, who is, you're helping people and coaching people and all the things. And you're like, no, I'm in the thick of it. And I love this. So if you want to give us just kind of a rundown of the journey you've been on, however you want to abbreviate that or however much you want to share is up to you, but just where you are, just so we get a picture of where you are. And then we can kind of jump into kind of the lessons that you're in right now.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. And I will do my best to cliff notes this for everyone because it is quite a long story. This has been going on for decades, but it's changed. So I'll try to give the very short version of it because I know we've got a lot to cover. So when I was about 17 years old, I came down with, what they call mono/Epstein-Barr. And I really was incredibly sick. It was a very severe case. It was something that, doctors were saying that they had never seen a case like mine before and, all the things. So I'm going to be skipping a ton of steps here, but I was out of school. I was a senior in high school. I almost didn't graduate from high school. By the grace of God, I did. And so after I quote unquote recovered from that, my health just never was the same. I was not the same. But at the time, I mean, we're talking about like 1990, I'm 45. So 1997, 8 here. Okay. So there was not a whole lot of awareness, right? We just went to the doctor. I think I was still seeing my pediatrician at the time, right? And it was like, well, your body's just going to take some time. So moving right along, let's go to my 20s. I started experiencing a ton of random symptoms that were not so random, but to me, it was largely digestive, lots of like just really sort of uncomfortable GI things that were starting to occur. And really getting passed around doctor to doctor. And then, kind of like what we would call now is your typical autoimmune slash IBS slash, and back then it was like eat the fiber, do the things, and you'll be on your way. You know how that goes. So by middle of my 20s, that's when I started to experience chronic pain. And it started to come on, and it was really, there's so many moving parts here, and it's kind of a layered, complex issue. And it sounds kind of straightforward, but in reality, it's kind of not, because there's like so many details throughout this time. But I knew that I had like some sort of an imbalance within my hips. I was working as a personal trainer in my early 20s. I was super active. I was an athlete when I was in high school and before that as a child. But I always kind of knew, like just by looking at my legs, like I could kind of tell like one seemed longer than the other in a way. There was just something there structurally that I was aware of but didn't take very seriously. And I started to develop like a lot of chronic pain or pain that I thought was purely structural in my right hip. By the time I was like 27 or 28, I had some advice that was given to me to put a lift in my shoe. So it completely changed the way that I walked. At the time, I was also battling a lot more autoimmune. I was getting passed around from doctor to doctor, from, holistic to conventional, just all across the board. You have this. Maybe you have rheumatoid arthritis. Maybe you've got, and I was developing anxiety, tons and tons of anxiety. I was having panic attacks all the time, pulling over on the side of the road because I couldn't drive. It was a mess. I was a mess. And so I kind of got through this time. I was seeing different physical therapists. I was just doing different things. And by the time I reached about 30 years old, I felt like I sort of came up for air a bit. I felt like I was kind of coming to somewhat of a plateau. Things were getting a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but different, a little bit smoother in a way. And so let's see, moving forward even more, I went back to school at that time, got my esthetician license, started working in the industry, still on that lift, by the way, which the reason why I mentioned the lift is because it comes into play. So I'm in my mid 30s, married by this time. Meet a practitioner that ended up really changing my life, took me out of that lift. And basically I had to relearn how to walk. Amazing practitioner that really like dove in to my health, both internally and externally, really changed the way that I looked at holistic health. And I had been in healthcare up and down for years already. And so I ended up getting back into physical fitness. I really thought that I was like on the other side. I was just so happy. Every time I would walk into the gym, I just had this feeling of gratitude. I felt like I was really, really there. Like I was on the up. I finally thought that I was on the up. And then, life is happening. Things are happening. There's pain, but I'm pushing through. I'm doing things. I'm gaining muscle. I'm getting stronger. And one day in 2019, I'm in the gym and I have a spasm in my leg. And I thought, wow, that's a pulled muscle. That's something that but it felt different. And without getting into all of the details, that spasm in my leg, little did I know at the time, was about to change the trajectory of the next several years. And I don't have all of the answers for what it was or why it was so severe. But for the next several years, especially 2020, everything shut down. I was pretty much sidelined. I was not walking much at all. I didn't have amazing care other than my practitioner, who I still see today, who saw me during the whole COVID debacle. And I started to kind of coast in this deconditioning, I should say, car, where I started to slowly decondition over time. There are so many challenges that I have faced between 2019 and 2020 till now, but What I will say is I am still recovering. And while in some ways I have gotten better, I have seen more light in terms of health and what's going on from the inside and how everything is very connected, from the viral load, imbalances that I wasn't aware of, how that plays into chronic pain, nervous system regulation and dysregulation, which is huge. I will say that it has been the absolute challenge of my life. My mobility has been greatly affected in the last 5 years. And there's a lot to be said about that, because you tend to really struggle with your vitality and just with your overall confidence and how you walk through this world. And so in some ways, I have gotten stronger and more aware and have acquired more knowledge and have been able to help myself as I've gone down this journey. And in some ways, it's become harder because there's been new things that have been disclosed even recently. And I'm having to take and pivot. I should say take different steps and pivot in different ways, because I'm almost at a precipice. Like, I'm at a point right now where it's kind of it's a fork in the road. So I'm really having to make some changes and look at my health differently. And so I'm going to stop here so that you can chime in. But there's just, like I said, there's so many details that I skipped over, but to give everybody just like a little bit of an idea in just a few minutes.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I appreciate all the details of your journey because it is helpful. And I know that, the anxiety thing is like, it's almost like by default, that's what's going to happen when you're dealing with all this stuff. Like the anxiety is just like, of course you had anxiety.
Yeah.
So for you, when you're going through this and then, you hit the point where you're like, oh, I'm on the up and up. And then this other thing sidelines you. For you, and how you've kind of come in waves, or it's kind of come in waves. What's been the thing for you, or multiple things, I guess, how for you to keep the faith, right? And to keep pressing forward without giving up, or just accepting like, this is just how it is. Like, this is, because I know at some point for a lot of people, they get to a point where it's like, you just accept it. And I'm not going to keep trying to get better because I'm just going to accept this is where I am. So how have you what is your approach to this? Hey, y'all, we'll get right back to the episode. But first, let me ask you this. You've built a vision that others admire, and you've built something that you're really proud of. But behind the scenes, your body feels like it's lagging behind. It just can't quite catch up to your brilliance and your mission that you have. That late night second wind, the foggy mornings, the hormone shifts, the endless push and forcing. You can't strategize your way out of that. And you already know you don't need more supplements. You don't need another supplement stack. You also don't need another side hustle disguised as self-care, because nobody wants to have their health as a side hustle. This is about recalibrating your entire ecosystem. And that's why I created the Quantum Reset, a premium 3-month high-touch healing experience for visionary women who are ready to feel as powerful in their bodies as they do in their business. Inside, we decode your nervous system, your minerals, your hormones. We read your labs like the sacred text that it is, so we have actual answers. And then we pair that with deep energetic recalibration, subconscious release. We use gene keys, we use human design, and true embodied healing. This isn't about fixing burnout, because that's not what we're doing here. This is about becoming the woman whose body is powerful, whose body is completely electric, whose energy, clarity, radiance finally matches the size of her mission. If you know your success isn't meant to cost you your vitality, and you're ready for a science-backed, spirit-led reset, then the Quantum Reset is your invitation. So check the link in the show notes or send me a message on Instagram, and let's bring your body back online with your brilliance. Now, let's get back to the show.
It's such a good question, and it's a layered question too. And I will start by saying that, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge and prioritize in this conversation that my faith has been at the forefront. And also, I was a pretty fair weather believer in God prior to 2019. I think 2019 is really when I started to wake up. Like I said, I was just fair weather without getting into detail. And I think when I really hit the floor, like actually literally hit the floor, I think I realized that I could not do this without developing a relationship with God. And so as I've walked through the last 5.5 years, I have seen how present He has been in my life. And I have been given very clear indications that there was hope in front of me, even if I don't know what that looks like. Because journey fatigue is real. And when you are in the wilderness, for lack of better terminology, you are exhausted, and it takes everything out of you. And so I have had this hope that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when I look at the journey and I look at the ups and the downs and the things that, it's like when I look at things by sight, I should have no hope. I mean, in a lot of ways, I should have no hope, but that's not what faith is. And so my faith has grown so much through this process, and there has been a lot that has been revealed to me. And so I think that's been the cornerstone for me, alongside of just I think getting real about the fact that health is so far from just physical. Like you said, you pointed to the anxiety piece. It's like we store so much in our tissues, and there are so many things that are going on underneath the surface. And most people are just looking at health from a superficial flesh lens. And that's not the case at all. And so I think really tackling and looking at my life, past, present, and also hope in the future at all angles has been essential for me. And that's really what's kept me going.
Thank you for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense because, yeah, I do think that. And I think that's like probably, I mean, that would be a really fascinating study. I feel like that's probably why a lot of people kind of give up in the middle is when perhaps they're not putting all of those pieces together like you're talking about, right? It's not just the physical, it's all these other layered pieces. For your layered pieces, what did you find? And again, just sharing whatever you feel comfortable sharing. What did you find were some of the biggest, like on the mental emotional spectrum? What were some of those pieces that were contributing to your physical things going on?
Yeah, I think that one of the pieces that stands out for me that's important to mention is really the piece of understanding how things like settle in the body. So, you can go through something. As an example, like I'm 17 years old, I go through this traumatic experience that I don't really even think about really at the time. I mean, I knew how sick I was. I knew that I was bedridden. I knew that it was a thing and it was serious. It was evident the way my parents were during that time with me and all of that. But you're not even really realizing in the moment, like how traumatic this experience is. And I hesitate to use trauma lightly because it's a word that's, I think, passed around and kind of thrown around today. Like everybody's got trauma. And we do to some degree. We do. But it's more like how someone, their mind and their body handles the trauma. And I think that the things that we go through, the emotional experiences, the physical and emotional experiences, they sometimes get stuck and they don't process in the body the way that they're designed to process in the body. And it's really not our body's fault. And I think that one of the things that was the most important for me to realize through the years was that my body was doing every single thing right. And what I mean, even if there was pain present, even if there is pain present, even if there's a problem, my body is not attacking me. It's not out to get me. And changing that mindset and that perspective is incredibly important because, if you're scrolling through social media as an example, and you're looking at somebody's bio, and I'm not trying to judge or condemn anybody, and it's listing all the diagnoses, right? All the things about what they have, quote unquote, they're taking ownership of that. And I don't want to take ownership of any of it, because it's not me. And I needed to stop identifying with my stuff. And so I think that there's just I know that I'm kind of like throwing a bunch and hopefully I'm answering your question, but I think that was probably one of the biggest things that I needed to get to was my body's not out to get me. It's literally adapting to the circumstances. It's keeping me afloat. It's doing the best thing for me, which is surviving. And then also realizing that things need to be processed. And when they're not processed, they get a little stuck. And it's, again, not our body's fault. It's the way that we're designed and divinely designed. But we have to learn how to process the things that happen to us because they got to go somewhere. And if they don't process through, they get stuck in.
Oh, that's so powerful. And I'm so glad you brought that up because I agree with all of that so much because I think that is a big piece of it when we attach our identity to the diagnoses or even the lack thereof, right? We get stuck in that, I forget the term you used when you were telling your story, but we get kind of stuck in the loop of constantly trying to find the answer. And it's exhausting and it's mentally, emotionally exhausting. It's physically exhausting. Then, like you said, we attach our identity to it. And so I love that, being able to detach. And I think that's it's such a beautiful reframe that I walk through my clients through something like that as well, because I think that does make a huge difference on the trajectory of your healing path when you can look at your body and say, no, my body isn't against me. My body's not broken. My body's not fighting me. My body's not sabotaging. Like, it's doing exactly like you said, it's divinely designed to do this and to do these things and to act in this way, because that is such a powerful reframe, because
It
then
is.
we can see how divinely designed we are, and then we can take action from there. I think taking action from there versus taking action of it's so disempowering to be like, oh, well, my body's fighting me, my body's going against me, but that's such a disempowering perspective. So no, I think you did answer the question. I think that's such a huge perspective shift that is required, I think, to walk the path that you're on.
Yeah. And I think I should add, to that too. I'm not here. I understand that there are people out there that are trying to support people, or they're trying to, support themselves and others, like say they have a condition that they're walking through, all the blessings. Like, I'm not here to condemn anybody, and I completely understand. It's just that what I have come to realize and learn over the years is that words are so powerful, and the way that the way that we speak outwardly and the way that we speak internally, our cells are listening. And so if we are constantly attaching ourselves to the thing, my pain, my autoimmune, my this, my that, that is going to have an impact on us, whether we think it or not. We can actually, in our ego self or whatever kind of, sort of our, our head, we can be like, that's not affecting me. I know the difference. No, it actually is affecting you. It is.
100%. That is so true. That is so true.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's studies on that. Like, there's science to prove these things. So I think that is such a great point. And and none of this is to dismiss anyone's diagnoses, but it's separating the diagnosis from you as a human, as like part of your identity. It's that separation is the key.
Exactly.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I think, as I said, kind of when we first started, it's, for me anyway, I find it like a very unique take from someone who's like, you're in the biz, right? And you're sharing your journey from, for lack of a better word, the messy middle, right? And rather than, oh, let me get through the healing journey, like let me get to the end of the journey and then I'll share everything that I did. And I know this is something like you stand really firmly on, like it's important to share that messy middle part. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that, and why, because you could have chose to do otherwise, which neither one are right or wrong or good or bad, but you could have chosen the other, right? Is, well, let me wait to the end and then I'll share it.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, I want to first disclose my absolute humanness in it, which is that, I've had a lot of jobs in healthcare over the years, the wellness, esthetician, personal training, lots of different things. Like, I've been in and out of it for a long time. And it wasn't that I didn't have the experience to some degree within health, right? Like, I've been doing all of these different things. So I felt like going into sharing online, starting a social media account, quote unquote, blogging about health, when I first started doing that, which was months before that spasm happened to my leg, which was really ironic. I was coming from a place of, I just want to share. I want to share what's helped me. I want to share what I feel like people need to know, that health is not just pills and potions and lotions and all the things, right? It's literally like so much more than that. And I want people to know that there's more. And I'm going along, and then I get this drop into my head about the podcast. And I sat on it for way too long. And I understand that there's a time and a place for everything, and that there's no like wait, like we do the best we can, right, in the season that we're in. But I had incredible imposter syndrome, and I sat on the idea for a long time. And the nudging was getting louder and louder and louder. I have the craziest stories. I mean, there are some people in my life who, when I told them what was started to happen to about starting the podcast, I mean, I was having people come into my DMs on a weekly basis without me even speaking anything about starting a podcast, hey, do you know what you should do? You should start a podcast. This was happening weekly. And I mean, it was just like, finally I looked up and I just said, okay, already. Like, even though you know that I am not what I would consider to be fit, I guess that this is what I'm going to do. I guess this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I finally stepped into it because I realized who made the rule that you have to be healed, quote unquote, right? You have to be completely done. Also, there's no such thing. Why can't there be a space for someone who is literally walking through the fire? But also I've gone through certifications and it's not that I'm a research weirdo by just trade. I've like always been so interested and invested in health and I love helping people and all of those things. It's been such a passion of mine. I had to get out of my own way because who is it that's telling me, no, you can't because, you're still in pain or you're still dealing or you still have these issues. That's a lie. That's such a lie. It's really a lie from like the pit of hell, I say. I always say that, people laugh, but it's true. It really is a lie.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you're right. I mean, I think the big piece there is it's never done. So what are we waiting for?
Right.
If we're waiting for it to be done. It's never done. Like, it's just a
Right.
constant journey.
Right.
So that's so true. And there has to be moments. I would love to hear how you approach those moments because, like you said a second ago, like I'm human, right there in my humanness. So I'd love to hear for you in those moments where you have the days where you're like, crap, this sucks, or like, this isn't working, or, those days of just feeling down. And how do you deal with those?
Honestly, there are a lot of really hard days. There's more hard than there are moderate. There's certainly more hard than there are easy. And I honestly go back to my faith at the end of the day. I really do. I mean, that is really, I think, the answer for me because it feels when I think about not showing up, and I don't mean not resting. I don't mean, taking time for myself. But when I think about not showing up in this space, when I think about removing myself from potentially making a difference in someone's life, one person's life, that feeling is worse than the feeling of imposter syndrome. That feeling is worse. It takes over. And it's also built it's built a community for me as well. And so that I think it's about like almost, I don't want to say replacing the hard because the hard is still there, but this is so fruitful for me because it's equally blessed me as I pray that it has blessed others to show up in the space, to have guests, to, produce shows and to hopefully make some form of a difference, even a little difference. And I'm not even I say quote unquote expert, like I'm just the bridge. I'm just showing up so I can elevate people's voices that I truly believe in. But that really blesses me. And I think that it moves mini mountains in me and it helps my health too. And so it's kind of like this energy exchange, and so yeah, there's a lot of really down moments and a lot of really down days because I'm a human being and it's tough. And I walk a very, very, like literally walk a hard life. And it might not look like that to the outside. I was just having this conversation with someone the other day. In a way, I am incredibly blessed because if someone were to look at me, they would be like, they wouldn't see anything wrong. Right. And that's a huge blessing. And I thank God for that every day. On the flip side of the same coin, that can be challenging because you are struggling so much on the inside and what people do not see with their own eyes. And so it can become hard to explain, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, did I answer your question? I feel like okay.
No, you did. Yeah, no,
I'll stop there.
Makes total sense. No, it does. And I do see that. I mean, that's kind of a double-edged sword. It's like on the outside of it, it's like, oh, she looks fine to me. But on the inside, you're like, no, we've got all these things going on. So and I guess that leads me to my next question, because I know when talked about grief in different capacities on the show. And I think when you're going through health things, right? I know you've had to make a lot of lifestyle changes and you've had to let go of things that you thought were going to happen and maybe now they're not or whatever. There's a grief process, right, that happens in this. And you kind of accepting like, yes, we can have hope for the healing, but then there's also this level of accepting where I am and accepting the hand that's been given to us.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought up grief because there has been a very loud, I should say, like sign in front of me over the last close to a year. And, for a long time, I think that I was really hesitant to look at grief because I didn't want to almost like offend anybody. Like if I was speaking to somebody, I have friends who have experienced great loss in their life. I have a good friend that lost their only child. I have like, are people that are around me that have experienced profound grief that is very tangible. Real, I mean, and it's very well known by all people surrounding them. And then there's this other kind of grief, and it's the grief of a dream. It's the grief of what you thought that you would have. It's the grief of the things that have passed, the time that you have lost, the children that you wish that you could have had, all of those things. And what I think that I really had to and I think I'm still processing this, by the way. I don't think that this is over for me. Like I'm very much in the middle of it still, and I think it's a process, but there you have to acknowledge without shame that you are grieving. And it's not about not being gratitude, because you can hold gratitude and grief at the same time. You can look at your life and look at the blessings, and I look at some of the things that I have. I look at my dogs that I have that also drive me crazy, but also are my life. And I'm so blessed to have them as my little companions, as an example. And I look at, the fact that I have a home and, I live in a really pretty community, and like all of these, I have my family, my parents are super supportive, all of these things. And wow, all of the time that I feel like has been lost, or the dreams that didn't come true, or the family that wasn't created, or whatever. And so I think giving yourself I think my current process and challenge has been giving myself and asking God for all the grace, because I know it's already given to me. It's more me, right? It's me that has to give myself the grace, because you can easily fall into that pool of shame if you don't. And I think that shame is a trap. And I think that when you are trying to heal too, or your body is trying to heal, or you want to move from point A to point B, you want to see yourself elevate out of the stuck position that you're in, you cannot stay in that pool of shame forever, because it is going to plague you. And it is more toxic than any product that you're going to use in your home, or any non-organic food that you're going to eat. And so I think, to answer your question, is there is so much grief attached to this. And I don't think that I really faced it until recently.
Thank you for sharing that. It's such a dichotomy, right? And I think you said it so well, because you can hold gratitude and grief at the same time. And I think that's where people have so much trouble processing the grief. And that's where the shame ends up coming in, because in their shame, I should be grateful. I shouldn't be, right? And like you said, if you've ever looked at the work of Brene Brown, like shame is, it's a disease, and it will take over you like a cancer. And it is, if we look at it on a, energetic scale, it's the lowest vibration emotion, right? It's the most dense emotion. And so it weighs on you. And so I think that what you just said is such a powerful way to be able to handle and process grief, if we can just feel it. And we can feel the gratitude and we can feel the grief at the same time, but not releasing any attachment to shame within that, like being able to hold both. And honestly, I think as we grow into emotional intelligence, that's the beauty of this life, is we get to hold both. I get to hold the grief and I get to hold the gratitude. I get to grieve these things that never happened, this thing that happened that I didn't think it was in the cards for me, but here I am. But then also be grateful for. So I think that's kind of the beauty of the human experience. We get to experience the tremendous loss and grief, and at the same time, the gratitude and the joy that comes with that. Because it's two ends of the same spectrum, in my opinion. So it's just being able to hold both of those.
Yeah, it's so true. And, it's cliche. You hear people say the most cliche things, but sometimes the cliche things really are, they're so true.
They're
And
cliches
it's
for a
like,
reason.
they are. You don't really, it's like you don't really know light without dark.
Right,
And
that's it.
it is so cliche to say that, but you really wouldn't know.
Exactly.
If you don't, and I'm not saying that everybody, everybody's got their own experiences and their own trials and their own suffering and their own things. And some people really do have harder hands, right? There's always going to be people that have it, quote unquote, worse than you. And then there's also going to be people that, seemingly are walking through life a lot easier than you. That's just life. And sometimes it is unfair. It actually is unfair. No one said that life was going to be fair, but it's like, are you going to stay in that mindset of this is not fair, this is not fair, this is not fair? Because you can also hold that. You can
Mm,
hold, this is really not fair. And it doesn't have to be this or that.
yes.
And what am I going to do to shift?
That's it.
Because if I stay in the shame, if I stay in the this isn't fair, if I stay in the victim mentality, then I it is honestly, I am digging my own grave.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it would boil
Yeah.
down to, And so
Yeah.
it's a choice. No matter what situation you're in, at the end of the day, it is a choice. And believe me, I get it. Oh my gosh, I know suffering so well. And I know long-term suffering so well. And I understand because there might be people listening that are like, she doesn't get it. I get it. I certainly get it. And it's not easy. It is really not easy to do. But at the end of the day, we have more agency over our minds and the way that we choose to move through our days than we think. And that also parallels, which is a whole nother conversation for another day, that also parallels the nervous system and like how important it is to look at that and like how that plays into the way that your mind is operating.
Yeah. Yeah. To be able
Yeah.
to hold all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so well said. That's so well said. And thank you for sharing and just your honesty around that. Like, I'm still processing this and I'm still coming to grips with. I mean, I think that's such a powerful stance. And I mean, honestly, I could keep talking about this. This is such a great conversation. And there's so many wisdom nuggets here in all of this. I do have one more question that I want to ask you. But before I ask you that, can you let everybody know where they can find out more about you? And of course, your amazing podcast, they can and follow you and your journey and all the things that you're sharing with the world.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think the hub, platform for me is Instagram, good old Instagram. But I have 2 accounts on there, and I'm sure, we can put them in the show notes, but I started sharing my journey and all things health, and it's kind of like no topics off the table. My account is called The Gift of Goods, and then the podcast account is linked to that, which is my podcast name is Intentionally Well with Vanessa Lopez, and you can find it on any listening platform like Apple or Spotify. I do also put them up on YouTube now. I have like a little YouTube still over there, but Apple, Spotify is mainly how people listen. And then the podcast account on Instagram is well.Vanessa. And then I'm also on other platforms too. You can find me on like TikTok, on X, even Threads, but for the most part, I'd say Instagram and TikTok are the main, and then obviously Apple and Spotify and YouTube for Intentionally Well.
Perfect. And of course, I
Yeah.
will have all the links to that in the show notes. So you can go give Vanessa a follow
Awesome.
and go subscribe to her podcast.
Yeah.
The last question I want to ask you is, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Wow. To live with purpose. Okay. That's a great question. Wow. This is honestly what just dropped in. So I'm going to go with it. Because usually when it drops in that quick, it's not from me. To realize that your life is not about you and that you might have struggles, you might have tribulation that seems so great and so hard to overcome, but there is so much purpose to your life. And when you realize that it has a lot less to do with you and a lot more to do with how you are going to minister to other people in this life and make a difference, whatever God has called you to do, that is your focus. And that has been my focus. And that will continue to be my focus, God willing, until my last breath. And so I think that realizing that it's less about self, it's less about me, and it's more about how can I be and contribute to this world and do what I'm called to do, which might not be what I thought it was going to look like, and do it with humility and do it with love. Because there needs to be more of that, I think. And, there are so many people that are suffering in so many different ways. We're in 2025 and the world is literally on fire. And so I think that if you can bring some sort of compassion and grace and love to people, and also truth. And sometimes the truth is not always comfortable to hear, but if you do that and you bring truth with love and grace, then I don't really think that you can go wrong. So I think that's my answer.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
thank you for spending time with us and sharing your journey and your story. I mean, it is here. That's what life is about too, right? We share our journeys to help someone else on theirs. So thank you for sharing yours and being so honest and open and vulnerable with all of it. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you again for having me on. It's really been lovely. It's been so, so, so wonderful. So thank you.
Yes, of course.